and it let out this blood-curdling, guttural scream.
On the side of the road, he sees a deer carcass and something eating on it, which he thought was a bear. And as the lights hit it, it stood up. And, like, this gives me chills talking about it. He said it stood up and it had the face of a man.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bigfoots of America podcast show. I'm your host, Bryan Sawyer, coming at you. This is episode 22, and my guest today is a guy by the name of Tim Dills. He is my brother from another mother. Tim, even just last week, I think it was, he had me laughing for a good half hour straight. I was crying. I couldn't breathe. All of that. He is just a natural funny man, and he is a Christian brother in the faith as well. So Tim and I really kind of look at Sasquatch and the whole paranormal thing kind of a lot of alike. You know, maybe not exactly alike in some of the particulars, but man, I would say it's close to 99% from all of our previous conversations. Tim is also a member of the NCI team, which stands for the North Carolina Investigates team. They do all things paranormal. They travel around the country speaking at conferences. All of them have had their Bigfoot sightings and encounters, and I am just so excited to have Tim here today for episode 22. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Tim in here if I can find him. Hey, Tim, you there?
Yes, sir.
All right.
You doing all right, buddy boy?
Man, been doing good. Super busy. We've got to film. We just signed that contract to film 2 more seasons of the Bigfoots of Michigan TV pilot series. So I'm scheduling all that right now. We got 2 episodes in the can, and then trying to keep the Bigfoots of America podcast show running, just doing 1 episode a week to keep it running. So you're next up, my man.
Well, I sure appreciate it.
All right, Tim. So, we're on every Tuesdays and Thursday nights on the Channel 12 TV network. Randy Stewart, man, everything he's got going on there in Las Vegas. What a great platform. So everybody out there, get that app, the Channel 12 TV network. It's a live streaming platform where you can find just a multitude of shows, from cartoons, paranormal shows, wrestling shows. Your host, Randy Stewart, over there has been so kind and gracious to us. And yeah, man, the NCI team show is it every just Tuesdays and Thursday nights, Tim? Or is it more than that?
Yeah, we do it every Tuesday and Thursday.
Okay, fantastic. Well, this episode is all about you here on the Bigfoots of America podcast show. And I'm anxious to hear your whole background, how you got started, how you got into this, and just all the crazy encounters that you've had. So I'm going to shut up right now, and it's your turn to talk.
Well, I appreciate it, buddy boy. I guess I was a lot like most kids, growing up in the 70s. I was born in 67, so I'm a kid of the 60s and 70s and 80s, and just the Bigfoot stuff, reading about it in school, and just boy stuff. I don't mean that girls don't get into it, but I can't speak for girls. I'll just talk for myself. But being a boy, right. I was into that kind of stuff, but I never honestly figured anything about nothing here in Western North Carolina. I figured if anything, if Bigfoot was real, that it would be out in the Pacific Northwest or somewhere like that. And
right.
And then in the late 70s, my dad and one of his friends up actually where one of my research areas is now, they come across a set of tracks up there. And my daddy's buddy, he's a big old boy. He's about 6'5", 6'6", weighed about 350 pounds, size 14 shoe. And
Wow.
they come across these tracks in the snow while deer hunting, and he put his shoe, his boot inside of that track, and they was track all the way around it. And
Holy cow.
so they're thinking some idiots up there walking around in the snow. You know, we didn't think nothing about Bigfoot or anything like that back then. And honestly, I hadn't thought no more about it. I mean, that was always in the back of my mind that they'd found the tracks, but not really putting two and two together, so to speak. And in 2008, I was outside here at the house skinning a deer out, and this guy comes up, and I wish you could have met him. He's a great Christian fella, and you'd have really liked him. But he come up, and he talked real fast, and I do mean fast. My name is News Corbett. I just moved in the house up above you up there, and I see you like hunting and fishing. I do too, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And I'm trying not to cut myself skinning this deer out, and he takes off, and my wife comes in, and she said, "Who was that?" And I said, "Well, I got his name's Newsom Corbett. He moved in up above us on the hill up here, and he likes to hunt and fish, and he'll see me in a couple of weeks." And true to his word, and this was in 2008, and true to his word, in about 2 weeks, he showed up, said, "Get your fishing poles, let's go fishing." So
Fantastic.
we did, and become best friends. And the property that they live on, his wife still lives there now, even though he's passed on. But her family has some property that is behind a Locks Forest Service gate, and you can't get in there without having the key to the Forest Service and all that kind of stuff. And he said, "We need to make that our hunting place." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'm all for that. If I can quit climbing these mountains and have just one spot to go hunt, that'd be great." And so we started putting out feeders and stuff like that. And he told me, he said, "We've got to get even with my boys." And I said, "Okay, what you got?" And he said that, and now this was back when the trail cameras was 35 millimeter film. Okay. And he said that his boys took a set of fallow deer horns out of the cabin and stuck them out in front of the camera to where it only took pictures of the horns, like there was a weird deer running around, and he was freaking out. And he got his, him and his wife was at Walmart getting the film developed, and his wife said, "Did you look at any of the other pictures?" Because the one with the rack on it was the very first one he saw. And he said, "I ain't got to." He said, "They don't have deer like that here." And he's running around throwing stuff in the buggy. "I got to get in the woods. I ain't leaving until I kill this thing." And she never could get him to calm down and to look at the other pictures. And when she finally did, it showed his boys, and his boys was full grown. And them and a bunch of their friends had been staying up at the cabin, and it showed them all out in front of the camera with the horns. So he said, "We got to get even with them." And I told him, I said, "Okay, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. My daddy," and I told my dad back in the 70s found that set of footprints, and I told him about them. I said, "I've got the stuff at the house. I'll make us a set about 18 inches long, and I'll mount them to some shoes, and we'll sneak up there, and we'll act like there's a Bigfoot up there." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "That'll get them." So we went up. Sure enough, they had a band. They'd been playing all night and was still asleep. So we snuck up there and broke some limbs off and made some tracks in the mud where, Stevie Wonder could have found them, or so we thought anyway. But But anyway, we've done that, and he told me, he said, now they'll be getting up before long, and they'll call me because they always go up to what they call the meta and shoot their guns and all of that stuff. And I told him, I said, well, I can't be here because I'll get to laughing. I can pull a good joke, but I can't be around it because I'll give it away. And so I come on back home. Well, he did too. And then they called him. He went back, and they walked right by the tracks and never even saw him.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, you walk right by these tracks, and I'm talking at least, I think I made them 18 inches, the best I remember. And and I mean, I took my Dremel and I rounded the toes and in between the toes, and I went to a lot of detail on them, and they didn't even see them. And they walked right by them, and he said, no, you boys ain't getting me again. And they said, what's that? He said, this track right here. And they backed up. Oh, Lord, Daddy, that's a Bigfoot track. We got Bigfoots up here. Do you know how much money it's worth if we can prove them things is real? We got to get trail cameras. We're going to sell everything we've got. We're going to get trail cameras. We're going to stay up here until we catch this thing. And he was just letting them go. You know, they took it hook, line, and sinker. Well, it upset them so much that they started to call, and they told their daddy, said, we're going to call the guy that the place we're supposed to be playing tonight, and we're going to call that off, and we're going to stay in the woods. And he said, no, you give the man your word, you're going to stick to your word. And so they did. And while they was gone, their dad went to them where they was playing their gig at, and I snuck back up there and got my shoes. And I turned chairs over on the porch and throwed some out in the yard and throwed clothes everywhere up on top of the house. And I mean, I really done it up good. And they come in about 2:30 in the morning and called their daddy. And Daddy, this thing's been back. While we was gone, it's come back and made a mess out of everything. That thing's just saying in your face, we got to find this thing. And their bass player said, I don't know your daddy that good, but he said, you about want to check with him. Something's going on. And so they called the next morning and said, Mama, is Daddy Bigfoot? And she said, I'll let you talk to him. So he gave him the phone, and he told him, he said, that karma's rough, ain't it? So everybody got a big kick out of it. You know, everybody, ha, we got you. And all that stuff. But the crazy thing is that's when stuff started happening. And wow. we started, because that property, they would only come up maybe once or twice a year, if that, and come up for a weekend, and that would be all that anybody was up there. So nobody was on the property that much. Well, when we started going on it every day, then things started happening. The very first vocalization, he told me, he said, there's a wild hog coming in and rooting the yard up, and I need to kill it because it's making a mess. And I told him, I said, well, I'll take my crossbow since you're on behind the Forest Service. You know, it ain't no sense in shooting a gun and causing a big ruckus when we don't need to. We'll just take my crossbow and shoot it, and it'll be over with. And that first night, it was on a Monday night, we got up on the top of the loft, took the screen off the window, and was sitting there, and 3 raccoons come out in the yard in the street light. You could see them moving around and stuff, and all of a sudden, after about 10 minutes, they turn around and run back into the bushes, and something grabbed one of them. And all of a sudden, you just hear a great big wah, and everything went dead quiet. And I looked at him and I said, buddy boy, something's not right. I said, that wasn't a bear. And I don't know of anything that we've got around here that makes that kind of noise. We've got the black panthers, we've got the red wolves, we got mountain lions, all of that stuff. And I've heard all of it. And I said, this is something I've never heard before. And then it started whistling. And it would whistle about every 10, 15 seconds. It just a single whistle. And we kept sitting there in the dark and kept listening. And we probably sat there for another 15 minutes waiting on the hog to come out. But whatever that was, whistled the whole time. And then whenever we turned the light on to leave, the whistling stopped. And I told him, I said, something just ain't right, because I don't know of anything that can whistle like that that's going to jump on a coon. Raccoons, they can fight pretty good. They can whoop a dog a lot of times by themselves. And so that was the first encounter we had with a Bigfoot up there. And then after that, it was screams and yells and rock throwing and stick throwing and messing the trails up, going up to our deer stands and that kind of stuff.
Awesome. I wonder what attracted the Sasquatch. Was it the hog? Was it you guys, your presence? Because you said it kind of correlated with you guys being on the property more. I wonder. See, sometimes like my location over here, man. You bait them, you gift them, and they start showing themselves. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably what happened. Him and his boy had told me about things that had happened while they was growing up and younger. But when I met them, they was already in their mid to late 20s, and but they talked about being growled at, and they thought it was a mountain lion. And then I played for them a growl, a Bigfoot growl, and they said that is exactly what we heard. So I think the Bigfoots had been on the property the whole time, but then the more we got to messing around and putting out feeders and in there hunting and shooting and on almost a daily basis, it sort of got them upset because they had the whole place to themselves pretty much.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And,
the topography, I'm just thinking, didn't mean to cut you off. What's the topography like? Is it hilly, mountainous? What?
It's mountains. There ain't nowhere you can go in there that don't go uphill.
Okay.
And
so with that question, I gotta ask you real quick.
Okay.
And then you can talk. I heard one time, and before I forget, that one of my eyewitnesses, Hank Kress from Kentucky, he believes that they actually not necessarily fight with each other, but they stake out claims of like their own like a certain clan will have its own mountaintop. What are your thoughts on that?
I honestly believe so. I really do, because just in that area, I know, and I can show you trails where they come through and they'll leave his area, Newsom's property, and go through the woods, and there's a trail that'll go and come through into some cornfields a pretty good ways off. So I do know they're traversing that, and I've had a buddy of mine that's got some high dollar bear dogs, and he said for some reason his dogs will chase something to the top of a ridge. On the other side of the ridge is Newsom's family, or his wife's family's property, and on this side of the ridge is ganglands. So he said it will chase something, and they'll run it until it gets to the top of that ridge. He said, then my dogs come back scared to death and won't get out of the truck.
Wow.
And so I think that one clan right there is the one that's got that area right in there covered.
Okay. Awesome. No, I wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy, Didn't forget to ask you that. Yeah, they carve out their own territories. Oh
Hmm.
my goodness.
And
Go,
another
go.
thing, I know I can take you to where I know at least 5 family groups of them are in my county. And the reason I
Really?
know that is because I'll go hunting over here one day and get screamed at. I go to another place another day, I get yelled at or followed or whatever. And I know of at least 5 places that I do that I've had encounters in, and there's no way that they knew I was going, from one end of the county to the other, because 9 times out of 10, I don't even know where I'm going hunting the next day until I wake up that morning and say, all right, I'm going here, yonder, or wherever. And so I know of at least 5 different groups of them.
Fantastic. All right. All right. So now with that said, so now you've got me thinking. We've talked about this before, I think, on the NCI show. Um, what do you think? What you just said, what, 5 different clans, maybe? So, how
Mhm.
is the population? Is it exploding, in your opinion?
I think so. And I mean, because I'm I never, thinking back to when I was growing up, and of course I didn't know anything about them being here, but I don't remember the structures and stuff here. Even seeing that kind of stuff growing up that I'm seeing and finding now. Every once in a while, I live in the county where the Appalachian Trail comes through, and there's a place called Siler Ball, and they have a hiker shelter there. And I can remember growing up reading people's stories about seeing a Bigfoot close to the shelter there. And I'm thinking, oh, you bunch of city slickers, you're just seeing a bear and thinking it's a Bigfoot. But looking back, more than likely, it probably was one. But I think their numbers are starting to get to where that it's harder for them to hide. You know, and I've talked about this some, and I have no way of proving it. But when the settlers come over here, they was shooting anything and everything. And a lot of times you would read newspapers of somebody killing a wild man or a hairy man or something like that. Well, how many of those was actually Bigfoots? Even Daniel Boone killed one when it attacked his son. And so I'm wondering, now that we ain't killing everything in sight, are their numbers starting to build up to where that, there's getting so many of them that it's sort of like the wild hog population. The biggest part of it started in Texas, and now it has spread all across the South. Even here in North Carolina, we have hogs a lot more now than what we did even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I'm wondering if there's not the same thing. And with the food and all of that stuff, like I say, they're not getting shot at. They're not competing for food now that the wild hogs is on the scene. And I know they love to eat wild hogs because I've actually, on my audio recorder, you can hear one catch one and kill it. You can hear the pig squalling and all of that stuff like it does when it's being tortured. And in one of my research or hunting areas, I had 23 different hogs on camera, and in a year's time, it went from 23 down to 3. And the
Oh
only
my
difference
goodness.
was that the Bigfoots moved into it. When I first found that place and started hunting there years ago, there was no sign of Bigfoot whatsoever.
Let's talk about then just what you said. You're a hunter. So, see, I love these kind of conversations because I'm a city boy and you guys have been very patient with me when I continually ask you questions. I'm not a hunter. So, let's talk about that. Let's talk about because, the general population, anybody who only looks at this subject on the surface doesn't realize how deep it goes. So let's
Mhm.
talk about what kind of predators could actually kill off these. And now I know how aggressive these hogs are. You just don't walk up on them, you're going to get attacked. So, what
Yeah.
kind of predators do you have down there that could take out a herd of pigs in large numbers? Yes, of course, man, and then you've got the occasional black bear, but you're not like overpopulated with cougars or anything, are you?
No. Out of all the years um, I've had trail cameras in the woods. I've got pictures of one cougar. I have physically seen the red wolves that we have. I've only seen two of those, and
Okay.
um, and I have seen one black panther. And I was
I actually
within.
and I'm sorry to cut you off. You got to remind me off camera, whatever. I might have a picture of a red wolf when I was down in Kentucky, Slump, Kentucky. I put up some game cams, and I got a strange creature on there. Sure, it could be a coyote, but it looked different to me than a coyote, at least from what we see here in Michigan. So yeah, sorry to cut you off, but I want to run that picture by you because maybe that's one of those red wolves. But go
Okay.
ahead.
But I've actually seen the black panther. Me and my brother sprayed it with a garden hose.
No.
Yeah, when we moved from that location when I was about halfway through the sixth grade, so it was um, before we moved. So I couldn't have been no more than 9, 10 years old, something like that. And but I mean that thing, I can't live. It had a head on it like that, and was about 6 feet from the tip of its tail to the tip of its nose.
Oh my
And
goodness.
my dad saw them. They hung around there. The people that we rented the house from, they was three of them, and they would hang around their cows. Luckily, none of them never did. They never did lose no cows to them, or nobody got jumped on. But Daddy went to the Forest Service and told them, and they said, "Well, take a picture of it, and we'll believe you." And he's like, "This was in the backyard when my boys within 15 feet of them, and it could have easily jumped on any of us." And he said, "I'll take a picture of it, all right, just as soon as I kill it." And he stayed after them for a while, but they finally moved on.
Okay.
But we've got the red wolf. We don't have a lot of the red wolves, like I say. I'm 57 years old, getting ready to be 58, and
Congratulations.
oh well, thank you, sir. But I've only seen two of the red wolves in all my years of hunting. So
Okay.
I've heard them a couple of times, but I've only seen them 2 times.
Okay.
And so we do have some of those, but our biggest predators is going to be, number one is going to be Bigfoot and Dogman and black bears. And I'd say that's going to be our highest numbers.
Okay.
Like I say, I've only got one mountain lion or cougar, whatever you want to call it, on trail camera. So they're here, and the Forest Service knows them. They're here because I had a game warden friend that I talked to about it, and I told him I was going to kill one, and he said, "You can't do that." And I said, "But you say they're not here." And he said, "We know
Right.
they're here." So they know they're here. But in that one area where the hogs got took out, the only thing that was left was 2 pregnant sows and a boar. And I honestly think they was smart enough to know what it was, because I had that next year, our Forest Service roads and stuff closed down the first day of January, and they stay closed until the first day of April. So you've got about 3-4 months there that, everything that's back behind them, like these places are 8-10 miles back in the woods. Stuff like that, they don't get messed with for those 3 or 4 months. And I finally got hogs coming back in, and there was a female that had about 8 small ones. And in a week's time in that area, they went from 8 down to 2.
So you're saying, okay, all right. So you're saying Sasquatch, and I believe this as well, but you're saying Sasquatch is intelligent enough to basically land manage. It doesn't deplete an area's full resources. It won't come through and then wipe out the whole population of hogs, so to speak, and then move on to the next. They're only gonna take so much and then move on to the next area. So so the hogs will repopulate.
Yeah, and that area, I've took Robert and George up there, and right now the Bigfoots are still there, but the hogs are making a rebound too. So evidently they've let them go long enough to where they're starting to get a number of them built back up again.
Okay, fantastic. And then that's going to draw in more Bigfoot, and that cycle just keeps happening. There is one more question I want to ask you, and then we'll get into what we think Bigfoot are, why you think the population is increasing. But you're out, I'm a little bit bogged down doing this TV show. I've been asked to speak a couple of times at conferences. I just haven't had the time yet. I'll get there as soon as our production's over with, or whenever I can. But you're a guy who's out there at the conferences. You're mingling with the people. What are the thoughts on the street? Back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even until recently, and even still now, it's taboo to talk about Bigfoot. I mean, more people are accepting of UFOs, I think, than the Bigfoot subject. But you're out at the conferences talking to the people, all the crowds that come through. Gee, how many you guys do? Just multitude of conferences. What's your thought? Is the general population becoming more accepting of the Sasquatch subject?
I think they are. It's almost like it's become a fad, like
Okay.
tie-dye shirts and everything else. It's Bigfoot's in right now. But
Gotcha.
even before that, and even now, you still have some people that don't want their name mentioned, but they'll tell you that they've had encounters and stuff like that, but they still don't want their name mentioned because of the negativity. Because trust me, being on Facebook in certain groups and all of that stuff, I had one guy argue with me, and I put up pictures and all of this stuff, and for almost a week, me and him back and forth. And finally he said, yeah, I know they're real. He said, I've had my own encounter. And I'm like, well, you idiot, why you been a jerk and trying to argue about stuff if you know they're real? And so, it's one of those things that people are going to say that they're not. And I honestly think a lot of them, and I know this is probably going down the rabbit hole, but I think a lot of them is put there on purpose to try to ridicule and make fun of so that people don't believe you. And
the trolls are on purpose the trolls so we
Yeah.
don't know the truth, so to speak,
Mhm.
from whether you want to call it government entities or whatever, the misinformation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they try to argue, first they'll argue with you just to get you stirred up whether they exist or not, and then but then if that doesn't work they'll try to argue with what they actually are. Oh, they're just a big ape, and then
Yeah.
ridicule you if you think there's something more than just a big ape.
Yeah. And so you meet all kind of people, but the one thing that I do love about the conferences, I mean, yeah, you know me, I like to talk. I can talk all day long, but I like hearing other people's stories, and that's one thing I love about going on different podcasts and people coming on to our podcast is I get to hear other people tell things that has happened 1,000 miles away, but it's happened exactly like it did to me. And not that I'm doubting it. I'm past that. I'm to the point, and I don't like to be a jerk about it. But I'm a knower. I'm not a believer. I'm a knower. I
Yeah,
mean, when you see one within 25 feet of you, and it steps out from behind the tree, you pretty much know what you're looking at. And so that part, but I do love the part about people telling us about their encounters, and I think that there's always going to be some people you could lay a body out on a slab and let them go through it from top to bottom. You could let them shoot it out in the wild, and they would still argue that it ain't real. And there's some
for
people
sure.
that want to be that way no matter what you do, and then there's other people that know they exist and know the encounters that they've had, and it's one of those things that you get to the point of, well, it don't matter if anybody believes me or not, because I know what's real.
For
And
sure.
it's sort of like driving a different kind of vehicle. All your buddies has got Fords and you got a Chevrolet. Well, just I'm still getting there. It may be a little bit slower, but I'm
They're a little
still
bit
getting.
different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to that sighting you had then. Give us the lowdown of that, because then there's another aspect that I've noticed in all the people I'm talking to as well. Tell us about, but you go ahead and you tell us about that particular sighting.
The very first one I ever had, I was bow hunting, and I was walking up a ridge line and going to get up on the very top of the ridge, at the top of an old clear cut. And I got almost up to the top of it, and I stepped in an old logging road, and out from behind a big old oak tree, that thing stepped out, and I started watching it, and it was standing upright. It took about 5-6 steps on two legs, and then it dropped down to all fours and took off. And I mean, it was lightning fast. And when I looked at it, I knew it wasn't a bear just from looking at it. I mean, bears don't have shoulders. You're talking with something with 3 to 3.5 foot wide shoulders. A bear don't have that. Bears come straight down. So I seen the shoulders when it stepped out, and then when it dropped down, I noticed how much longer the hands was than its legs. It was almost like a hyena. It was jacked up in the front end and low in the back end when it took off running. And that lasted probably maybe 8 to 10 seconds. And it covered about 150 yards in that amount of time.
Wow. So moving out. How, when you first saw it, This is what I'm always fascinated. Most people, other than George Lunsford, who runs directly after them, most people are scared half to death. But you're a pretty seasoned guy, and you're a pretty big guy. How tall are you, Tim?
I'm about 6'2".
Okay, yeah. So you're a pretty good sized guy yourself. Um, how did it make you feel? Did it challenge you? Did it alpha male you at all? Kind of give you a look? How'd that happen?
No, it's just like, oh Lord, you found me, and took off.
Gotcha.
I
And then
I
how did
don't.
you feel?
I was like, well, what in the world? It took a while for things to register what I'd seen and all of that. That I just went on back hunting. I didn't leave or nothing like that. I just went on to where I was going to hunt at and hunted the rest of the day.
Awesome, man. I give you credit. A lot of people are so scared. They at least with their encounters, and there's some more scary encounters where they're faced off and they're chased out. I know this area by me, man. Couple of guys are still shook up about it because they get surrounded and escorted out. So yours was more of a gentle sighting, and you're a heavy woodsman, so no problem with you. What were some of your other encounters?
That same area, I've had a couple of more encounters. I was in there turkey hunting, not in 24, but in 23. Me and my dad had split up, and we're probably a good half to 3/4 of a mile apart. And I got in there before daylight and got set down and didn't hear no turkeys gobbling or nothing like that. And it got up to about 9 o'clock, and I thought, well, I've got what a call that imitates a pileated woodpecker, and I thought, well, I'll hit that because a lot of times it'll make a turkey shock gobble and give its location up. So I hit that, and a a coyote started yelling about 100, 120 yards below me. And then a Bigfoot yelled. It shut the coyote up, and you could tell from where the sound come from that they was right on top of each other. And it yelled, and I thought, man, I can't believe that. And I was trying to get my phone out, but it was cold that morning, and I wore a jacket over top of my other stuff, and I couldn't get to my phone, and it quit yelling, and I thought, well, doggone, I missed a good opportunity. Well, it yelled again, and I tried to get my phone out, and it yelled 4 times, and I never did get my phone out to get it recorded because every time it quit, I thought it was done. And I got back in there, back out to where my dad was, and he was like, did you hear that this morning? And I said, yeah, it was right down below me. He said, man, it lit the woods up out here because we was hunting at the head of a lake, and evidently it had hit the other side of the lake and echoed back on him. So he thought it was right on top of him. But that was in the same area. I've had so many things happen. I've seen 4 of them. That was probably the closest one I've been to. We sit in, I don't know if your listeners know where Cage Cove, Tennessee is, but it's part of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. We actually sat in the truck one day watching one through our thermal binoculars behind a tree that had been pushed up, and people going right by us. This woman pulls up, and my truck at the time, I had all kind of Bigfoot stuff on it. She said, you ever see any of them things in here? And we're like, yeah, we're watching one right now. And she's gone. She jumped in the car and took off. And we've been followed about 1.5 miles into the woods and back out. That's when we learned that the smell that they do is not continuous. It's like a skunk. They can do it when they want to do it, and it's not a continuous odor. And I've heard them speak back and forth to each other. That's when I went from going to kill one to I decided if they're smart enough to have a conversation back and forth with each other, I didn't need to kill one just to prove that they're real. I mean, I know they're real, and I have learned since then that even if you did, it's going to get covered up. So, number one, another Bigfoot would probably kill you before you ever got out of the woods. Number two, how you going to get a creature out that weighs 800-900 pounds while defending yourself against, because they're hardly ever alone. And so I decided if they're that intelligent, I don't need to kill one just to prove to somebody that they're real. And like I say, I've had rocks thrown at me, sticks thrown at me. We've been bluff charged. You name it, and I've just about experienced it. Because like I said, this all started in 2008, and it's not stopped. It's been going ever since then.
Awesome. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know when, but I'm coming down to see you guys, probably at one of your conferences, and then hang out, maybe go out the next day. We're going to get it all worked out. So I'm really excited about that. Really excited. So you said something, and this is the way I think as well, is I'm not interested in killing one of these things. I don't know what they are. It's like you said, if they're having conversations, I don't know what they are. The way I look at it is God is allowing them to exist. So unless one is charging me and I think it's going to kill me, and I got to defend myself. But no, I'm not going out there hunting, And then on the flip side of that, I've heard of the horror stories, like you're saying, man. I've heard of people taking shots at these things, and the people are the ones that don't come walking out of the woods. They get torn apart. Now, there's a couple stories here in Michigan which will scare you half to death and make you think twice about trying to shoot one of these things. So now, I love your story, Tim. I love everything. But right now, my Christian brother, we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of what we think these things could be. Now, I always say, hey, man, I reserve the right to be wrong. They may be just some kind of other species that's living peacefully on the earth. They just want to be left alone. But as a Christian, I feel like I need to search a matter out, try to find the truth to it. And there are some concerning verses. And this is not to say that they're all bad, because I don't know. But there are some concerning verses in the Bible that I always talk about. The one is Luke 21:11, about the end times. Jesus is talking. He says, in the last days, there'll be earthquakes and famines and plagues. And he says, and there'll be fearful sights, which in the original Greek is the word phobotron, which actually means monsters. And then there will be, apo, or Oranos, basically things coming from the sky. So things in the heaven. There'll be fearful sights and things coming down from the heaven, which interpreted in the original Greek basically says, in the last days, you'll be seeing monsters and UFOs. That's the way I interpret it. And it's the timeline seems to match up. So then I'm like, okay, are the Bigfoot in Revelation 6:8 going to be part of the judgment that's upon those who are maybe don't get raptured out of here, and the judgment comes down where it says the rider of the pale horse, whose name is Death, will be given authority to kill with the sword. But also, one of the other things that he's allowed to kill with are the wild beasts of the earth, or the therion of the earth. So what are as my Christian brother, what are your thoughts about all of that? So that's in the back of my mind. I'm like, nobody knows exactly what Bigfoot is, but those are my concerns.
Yeah. And I'm like you. I think whatever they are, and this is the way I put it to the Lord when I was praying about it, about whether they was real or not, and about what they was and that kind of stuff. Whatever they are, you created it. It don't matter. Wherever they fit in, this earth, another universe, another dimension, whatever, it don't matter. You created it. So, and that's what I stick by. And I'm like you. I think that they are going to be part of the beast that that death and hell uses. I mean, what else? Of course, you got your lions and bears and a lot of other things that you could use. But what puts the fear in men? You talk about people who have seen these things, and usually either two things happen. You either want to learn more, or you never want to go into the woods and see them again. And it's funny that it happens along those two lines. I mean, I know of people that that don't want to ever see one again, and I'm like, well, I wish I saw one every time I went out, and I wish I could communicate with it. And when you get into the mind speaking, all of that stuff, I don't know, because I've never had it happen to me, so I can't say yes or no. But I'll be the first one to admit it as soon as it happens, because to me that would be awesome. You know what I mean? And I know you have. I know you have, and I've got a lot of confidence in you. So when you tell me that they can, I believe it. I've just not had it happen to me yet. So I can't. It's sort of like talking to a football player about baseball. Yeah, I know a little bit about it, but you need to get somebody that's a baseball player to find out about baseball, not a football player. And that's how it is. That's how I am on these things. Are they interdimensional? I don't know. I've seen them walk off, crawl off, run off, and if they are, I've not seen that. But does that mean that they're not? No, it just means I've not witnessed it yet. And so I'm still even though I've had a lot of encounters, I'm still at the infant stage of knowing what they are. And I think, like you said, we'll be wondering that till the Lord comes.
Amen.
And unless, one just walks out and says, hey, my name's Bill and I come from over here and we're here for this reason. But until they do that, it's anybody's guess.
For sure. Oh, I totally agree with you. And then I think there are different levels of Sasquatch. I think some may be more like Gigantopithecus, but then some, the Ernie Davio episode that just came out was that my last episode, where his encounter was very intelligent. It walked right up to him and communicated with hand gestures. Hey, don't shoot me. Basically, is what it said. Put his hands up like this. Pump twice. Don't shoot me. Even when Ernie went for his sidearm, it reiterated, hey, don't shoot me. And then pointed at its own chest, pointed at Ernie's, like, hey, we're the same. And then whistled or whatever it did. And then another one came running, and they were very human-like. Another one came crashing through the trees, met up with the alpha male. They both looked at Ernie, were shocked that Ernie was there, basically. And then they spoke and had their own language, And so you've got that high level. But then, yes, I've also heard of the ones where, maybe it just stood there and looked at you like an animal would, so to speak, like a bear might or something. So, yeah, I think there are different types of Sasquatch with different levels of abilities. Yes, I've had one mind speak to me at least once, and I'd forgotten about another incident, so maybe twice. I'm very careful with that second one. But the second one, which I had forgotten about until somebody reminded me, was they basically said, hey, we don't like to be called Bigfoot. We want to be called forest people, is basically what was said.
Yeah.
But the initial one, the main one I had where I first heard it, thanks for friendship,
Mhm.
Scout, that shook me and shocked me because my mind was in everyday domesticated life. I'm thinking about my family, probably groceries. I'm taking the garbage from the house to the back of the garage. Caught me totally off guard, like my fairy encounter. So it's when stuff you don't believe in happens to you, then like you said, you have to be open to receive it. And then us as Christians, we have to kind of turn to the Lord with it. Like you said, okay, Lord, you have, what's the verse? Basically says that there is not anything made or created without God the Father, without Jesus Christ. It says that all things were made through Jesus Christ. So these
Mhm.
things are allowed to exist right now.
Yeah.
And they have a purpose just like we do. So yeah, no, that's good stuff because one of the things I had come across, I got to look this up real quick, is that verse in Luke 21:26, where it says, men's hearts failing them for fear and looking after those things which are coming on the earth. And then, of course, it says, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. So, man, and I thought about most Bigfoot sightings, if they have a face off, they are scared to death. I've seen it, with my eyewitnesses who have been scared to death where they've had the close encounters. And it's very frightful. It's very life changing,
Mhm.
experiences. So these things do have that power. They have the infrasound to affect us physically. Their physical appearance scares us to death. But yeah, and then there just are different types, I've got the ones down here in kind of southeast Michigan. They look like orangutans, but then I've got a couple more. The ones in Massachusetts was human looking. One of the accounts up here in the UP was very human looking. So there are definitely different types of these things, man. And I don't think we'll, like you said, we're not going to know until God reveals all things in
Mhm.
the end. I do believe we're in the end times. And like driving to work, I need to stop at the stop sign. I need to obey the traffic signals. So I need to obey the signs that the Bible is giving us. Hey, in the last days, watch out for this and that. Don't stick your head in the sand. Don't say these things don't exist. Don't ridicule others. There's too many people out there, Tim, that have multiple paranormal encounters, whether it be Sasquatch or UFO. So let's not discredit these people. Let's give our own testimonies. Let's collect all this evidence and then try to paint a picture for us as Christians that correlates with what the Bible is telling us.
Yeah. And that's the thing about it. You can ridicule somebody all you want, but that still don't change nothing. I mean, you can talk bad about somebody, but that still don't change. And that's what I've told a lot of people. It don't matter what you say. It's not going to change what I know, and
Right.
and and it's not going to change other people's opinion. When these things make themselves known to people, and I honestly do think um, that over the years that I've got to where that they know who I am. They know that I'm not a threat, and that's the reason they don't bother me.
Yep.
I took George and Robert in there into that one place, and George about got hit 2 or 3 times with a rock, and
Wow.
we've only had rocks thrown a couple of times up there. More was thrown at George in that one day than I've had up there all before. And I don't
Wow.
know if it's because they just didn't know who he was, or you know what I mean. Something I
Yep.
noticed the last time we went in to my other research area, and these things will make a sound almost like a silverback gorilla, and it sounds a lot like a woodpecker, but you can pull it up on the YouTube, and the silverbacks will hit their chest right in here, and it sounds almost like a woodpecker. It's a, and it's got a distinct rhythm to it. Well, we started noticing that up there in my research area, and it'll start in a certain spot, and it will follow us up and stop at a certain spot. And then when we come out, it'll do it back down to where it was at originally. And I honestly think it's those, I think it's the Bigfoots communicating. And just another reason that I think that, the last time I was up there with my friend Rachel, and we told them, and I always do when I leave. I said, "Bye, guys. We'll see you next time." I said that, and it quit. The woodpecker sound stopped immediately until we got all the way back down to where it started at, and then it done it again. And then I told them again and said, "Bye, guys. We got to go." And I always turn around and wave at them, and it never done it again. But it's always from that one spot up to the other spot, and the spot that it usually stops at is where I saw the last one that I saw in person, and that's the one that when it saw me pick my gun up to look at it, it went behind the tree. I mean, I sat there and watched it for I don't know how long. But I was wanting to get that good up close face look and all of that stuff, and I couldn't pull it up on my phone. And I grabbed my gun, and I wasn't going to shoot it by no means. I was just wanting to look at it through my scope. But as soon as it saw me put my hands on my gun, it stepped behind the tree.
Wow!
So
I think
I laid the gun down. I did try to look just to see, and I couldn't see nothing but its left shoulder. And so I laid the gun down, and it dropped from standing on 2 feet. It dropped down on all fours and belly crawled back across the ridge, back into my research area. And I think they honestly know that I'm not going to hurt them. And I think that's one reason this past year in there, we had more interactions last year than I've ever been there before. And I think it's finally to that point to where they know that we're not going to bother them. And they still like messing with my cameras and all of that stuff, turning them around on the side of the tree and all of that stuff. But it's hard to describe, to be honest. It's one of them things that in your mind, you're like, well, what am I even doing this for? But then it's also like, well, I wonder what else they're going to do. You know, you just want more and more answers.
Yeah, and I think like you're saying, once they get familiar with you, they're so intelligent. They know how you smell. They of course know how you look. They know the tone of your voice. They look for all those predator or aggressive attributes, and they don't see any in you, and they're like, kind of give each other the thumbs up when it comes to you. Hey, Tim, we got to wrap it up right now. But man, you're one of them guys I'm never gonna be able to have enough on my show. So of course you're gonna be back. But we'll wrap it up right now. Why don't you go ahead and tell the folks at home where they can contact you, where they can find you, and all of that. Go ahead.
Okay. You can find me on TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram at Tim Dills 13. My email is timdills13 at Yahoo. You can catch me on Facebook. There's quite a few Tim Dills on there, but I'm the one that's got a Bigfoot track as my picture. So you can find me on there. And if you've got anything that you want us to come and investigate, or If you have questions, I certainly don't have all the answers, but I might have the one that you need at the time. If not, I can get a hold of my buddies and see if anybody else has got the answer.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tim. I can't wait to have you on again. But of course, I'm going to see you again tomorrow night.
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, man. I'm going to put you in the green room right now and then I'm going to wrap it up. So thanks again, Tim. See you in a moment.
All right, see you, bud.
All right, everybody. Tim Dills, veteran in the Bigfoot world, just so experienced. One of the guys I turn to for all my questions as I learn more about Sasquatch. As always, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Bigfoots of America podcast show. And stay tuned for our next episode. You can, of course, reach us at bigfootsofmichigan.com. Don't forget the S. You see that right over my shoulder. Bigfootsofmichigan.com. Go to our YouTube channel, Bigfoots of America. You can also listen to us on, let's see, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, Stitcher, and Pandora. So we're definitely trying to grow the show. It's going well, and we just thank everyone for being here and listening to our episodes as we talk more about Bigfoot. So as always, stay tuned for more, and we will catch you on the flip side.